All right, it is Casual Friday here at the office, and we're going to be talking on a thread that we started yesterday. But before we get to there, I want to talk about something I've thought about a little bit. I don't listen to as much sports stuff as I used to. I used to be a little bit more into sports than I am now. But I was thinking about how much time I used to spend, and it wasn't like I concentrated on it, but it was always somewhere in the background if I was kind of idle or if I could multitask. I would be listening to sports in the background, and it dawned on me at some point, I don't know, that it's 4 hours of, depending on the format, it's about 4 hours of listening to a couple of guys yap about sports. And each day only has, depending on what you're interested in, about three or four things that happen at the most, maybe one or two, maybe none. And they have to fill a show of 4 hours every day, and then after those guys are done talking, it's another 4 hours of different people yapping about the same things. Now, I say this because I'm trying not to repeat myself, and after a while it gets boring, and so I'm trying to come up with different things. And the way that at least sports shows do it, or if you listen to politics, the successful ones are the ones that try to think a little bit differently and don't just repeat what everybody else is saying. It gets boring if you just repeat what everybody else is saying. Let's just take a recording of those people and put it on a loop, and I can listen to it. I don't need different people saying the same thing. So, in the course of this, you might come up with, and hear things that annoy you, because I try to think differently, and I'm trying to make different applications. But I do think it's important to, at least, even if you disagree, don't get angry. Just chalk it up to some different thoughts. So I say, as we're working from yesterday's thoughts on having different sources. One of the most dangerous things that we do, and you can think of this, is to react to things. And it's not just so much the fact that we react, but it's how we react, right? There was a time in Nikopol that I reacted. My son also reacted. He was 5 years old. We were coming back from a doctor's visit, and it was wintertime, and outside it's very treacherous. They don't shovel, they don't plow. It's very treacherous in the wintertime there when it does snow. And we were going back to the bus stop, and we're at a corner, and we're kind of looking down because there's these, makeshift stairs or concrete stairs that aren't level and everything. And so I took the left to go to the bus stop, and Benjamin goes up the hill towards, well, he's not really looking at anything. He doesn't really know where he's going. He's 5 years old, but he was following me, except that the fact that we're looking down at our feet, trying not to lose our footing, he didn't see me turn left. And because it's windy and everything, and I've got my hat on and my hood over and everything else, I didn't hear him not behind me. And so at some point in time, probably about the same point in time, he looked up and I turned around, and we discovered that we're separated. At this point, panic ensued on both of our parts. I know this because I talked to him a little bit later. Even at 5 years old, he recognized what happened. He told me how everything happened, and I started yelling for him, and I ran back, obviously, to the last place I saw him. I had seen him behind me on the stairs coming up before I took a left. Well, he heard me yelling, he said, but because of the way the buildings are, he thought, the way my voice bounced off, he heard my voice ahead of him, so he's heading up the hill, straight towards the Central Market. I described the Central Market here a few lessons ago, and what it's like to be in this open, kiosk-y area with all these things. So he ran straight into that before I could see him where he was. He was already up the hill. And we both panicked, right? So I'd go home, and now Katie's panicking, and if he would have just stood still for a second and not panicked, if he would have just, we would have found him, and if I would have found him, then I wouldn't have this wonderful illustration to share with you. But we react quickly, and we make the things worse. Our unintended consequences of our reactions are often worse than the immediate situation. I mean, he was really only that close to me, but when he reacted, we made the situation worse. Uh, so when we panic, we call on other people to fix things. We just have this nature about us that says something's wrong, fix it now. So lawmakers, please fix this now. Wife, please fix this now. Husband, kids, parents, fix it now. There's something wrong. Preacher, fix it now. Somebody is an authority in any situation that when we look to that person and we look around and that person, fix it now. And so when we react, we make situations oftentimes worse. So we were talking about using one source, and we're going to talk about that. I want to tell one more story here, really, really quickly. And it's kind of an old story. You might even have heard it. It's told in the Middle East. And it's about a man. He's in Baghdad. He's a rich man. He has a home in Baghdad. He has various homes around the Middle East, and he's in the marketplace, speaking of marketplaces, and he sees a black-robed figure, and the black-robed figure turns around and looks at him and gives him a stare, and he recognizes, of course, that it's death. And he's felt death look at him personally. He knows this was intended for him. Death is there in the marketplace for him. So he runs as fast. He gets away from death. And he's surprised that he got away from death. And he goes home, tells his wife, he says, I have to leave. So he says, don't. He describes the situation to her, gets on his horse and runs. He goes to Samarra, where he has another horse, or another house, excuse me. And he says, I'm so safe. I got away from death. Nobody gets away from death. Well, the next day, while he's sitting on his porch in Samarra and enjoying, the fact that he got away from him, he sees a black-robed figure walking up his, the walkway towards his house, and he realizes he can't get away. And so he stands up and he says, I guess I'm going to have to go with you. And he says, I just have one question. He says, yesterday in the marketplace, you looked at me, but you didn't take me. You did. He's like, I thought I got away from you. He's like, no, you didn't get away from me. And he says, and it wasn't, the look wasn't a menacing look. It was a look of confusion, in a sense. And he says to death, he says, confused. He says, well, he says, I was surprised to see you in Baghdad because I had an appointment with you today in Samarra. And so the idea is often used often on the road to avoid something is when we run into what we're trying to get away from. And I want you to think about the medical experts, the singular source that we've been looking to, and that their advice has been primarily what we've been talking about in terms of determining our course of action. And what are their concerns? They're valid concerns. I know, in fact, many of you watching probably are medical experts. So what are your concerns? The concerns that I've heard anyway are not so much that we're going to, the course of action that we're taking is going to reduce the total number of deaths. Viruses don't work like that. Viruses pretty much take the deaths that they're going to. Viruses stop being communicable when everybody has antibodies. That's when they stop. They don't. You can't exterminate a virus. It's hidden. It's invisible. So it just gets spread around till everybody has gotten it, and those who are going to die are going to die, sadly enough. And there's no more immunity or no more unimmune people, and the virus goes away. But what we've heard about is flattening the curve. You've heard of flattening the curve, and the point of it, and I don't want to talk about the virus, but I want to illustrate something. We've been talking about, and the concerns have been, well, what in the short term, with the spike of things, we could have a lot of shortages of beds for people with different medical conditions. We could have a shortage of ventilators for people with heart conditions, or whatever the other situations, or lung disorders, or pneumonia, whatever the things are that people struggle with. We could have a shortage on our hands. And so we want to lower the curve and spread it out over a longer period of time. It's not going to change the total number. And that's a valid point. I don't want to dismiss that. But I want to think about something, because we're now talking about another group of people says, well, fix this. That's out of order. Fix this. What about me? I'm out of work. Fix this. And so we'll go to our lawmakers, and our lawmakers say, okay, we'll send everybody money. That should make everybody happy. And you want this, and we send people money, and that hurts our economy. People being laid off hurts our economy. The stock market crashing hurts the economy. Everything hurts the economy, and we keep on laying layers of things that hurt our economy. Now, we might come out of it just fine. I'm praying we do, and I see signs that we might, but we may not. It is a genuine possibility that a recession occurs, and not just a recession, but if this goes on into April and into May, if people have this we have to fix it now idea, that we could create a depression. Now I want you to think about what would happen if we created a depression. We would no longer have a tax base for when we're already delaying tax money, so our government's already going to be short money for the next 3 months. And so what are we going to do? What if we print that money, because that's what's going to happen, and then people don't get back to work in the same numbers? Now all of a sudden we're deep trillions of dollars in debt with no way to pay it back. All of a sudden we have to start cutting things. What happens? Again, this is just a thought. What happens if we can't fund Medicare and Medicaid? Here we were trying to prevent our elderly people from being in dire situations, and it's possible that we could have run to Samara and created a situation where our elderly, and larger numbers of our elderly than the several thousand that would die from this, we could now have a situation where tens and hundreds of thousands of elderly don't have good medical care because of the financial situation that we've created out of our immediate panic. It's just something to think about, but I want to give it a spiritual application because we're almost done here. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, he says, I charge you therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and dead at his appearing in his kingdom, preach the word, be instant, in season and out of season, convince, rebuke, exhort with long suffering and teaching, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires they will have itching ears and heap up for themselves teachers, and turn away their ears from the truth. And so in this is a lot of what we're talking about. The immediate reaction and our immediate desires that influence the course of actions that we take. But also he says this thing, and it almost sounds opposite to what we're talking about. He says, be instant. And I don't want to talk about, it's not talking about instant reaction, but he's talking about the ability to react in a moment because we're prepared for it, because we've thought things out, because we've prepared ahead of time what we're going to do. And I think that's important, to think about things ahead of time, to be ready for situations as they come and work through them so that we don't panic react, whether it's this or whether it's other situations that come up in the church, as we're we always have mini crises in life, just because that's the human nature. So I just want you to think about that. It's a little food for thought. And remember that you have a point of view because you have a background and you have a way you think, but be open to other people and their ideas, as we talked about yesterday, because in doing that we allow ourselves to work through the problems that we face as people and as a church in a way that allows us to have immediate reactions that are well informed. So, all right, have a nice day.